Stories from Upanishads and Purans, retold by Arghya Goswami.
What is the real price of a promise? A piece of gold? A bit of land? For one legendary king, price of his word was far, far greater. It wasn't his crown or his vast, prosperous kingdom. The ultimate cost of his promise was his beloved wife and his only son and himself. This is the story of a king so devoted to truth that he was forced to sell his own family and himself into slavery. It's a story that pushes the very limits of honor, sacrifice, and what human being can endure. This is the story of great Ishwaku king, ancestor of Lord Ram, Raja Harishchandra. Dear friends and listeners, today's episode is a chronological continuation from my last episode as per Markandeya Purana. When Rishi Jaimini showed interest in knowing more about Raja Harishchandra, the birds of wisdom began narrating the legend of the king to him. The birds said, in ancient India, during an age of great righteousness called the Treta Yuga, there was a king who was the living embodiment of truth. His name was Harishchandra, a noble king of the celebrated Solar dynasty or Surya Vamshi and an ancestor of Lord Ram. He ruled over the kingdom of Ayodhya and under his watch it was a paradise on earth. Streets were safe, the food stores were full, there was no famine or drought, the economy was booming, and most importantly, his people lived in peace, knowing their king was a rock of justice and integrity. Harishchandra was more than just a good ruler. He was a walking, talking principle. It was said that he had never told a lie in his life and would never ever go back on his word. His reputation for unwavering truthfulness was legendary, echoing through the heavens. For him, a promise wasn't just a string of words, it was sacred, unbreakable bond worth more than life itself. By his side was his equally virtuous queen Shaiva, who is sometimes called Taramati in various other scriptures. She was the partner in all things, his closest confidante, the heart of his world. Together they had a precious son named Rohitashva. This family was the soul of the kingdom, a perfect picture of love and duty. They were living a kind of idyllic peace, completely unaware that the gods themselves were about to put the king's famous virtue to a test so brutal that it would shatter their world and carve his name into the history with tears and fire. Up in the heavens, the gods had heard all about Harishchandra's integrity. They were impressed but also little skeptical. Could any man truly be that perfect? They decided to find out. And to run this divine experiment, they needed someone who had power and stubbornness to push the king to his absolute breaking point. They chose the great and famously short tempered sage Vishwamitra. The disaster that would unravel Harishchandra's life started on a completely ordinary day. The king, a keen hunter, was deep in the forest near his kingdom. As he was tracking a deer, a strange, upsetting sound cut through the quiet woods. It was the sound of women screaming in terror, begging to be saved. Now, the king didn't know this, but these weren't ordinary women. They were living personifications of sacred knowledge. The powerful sage Vishwamitra was in deep meditation nearby, performing intense rituals to master them. He was essentially trying to force their divine knowledge from them with his sheer willpower, which is why they were crying out. Harishchandra, of course, knew none of this. All he heard were people who sounded like his subjects, and they were in trouble. His sacred duty, his dharma, was to protect the vulnerable. So he dropped his hunt and charged towards the cries, vowing to save them. At this point, Vignaraj, the master of obstacles, quietly possessed Harishchandra's body. In his rush, Harishchandra burst right into Vishwamitra's meditation spot, and his sudden arrival shattered the sage's deep concentration. Instantly, the forms of sacred sciences vanished, their knowledge slipping right through the sage's fingers. Vishwamitra's eyes snapped open, blazing with pure fury. Years of his spiritual work had been ruined, his gold snatched away by this meddling king. The enraged sage confronted Harishchandra, his voice booming with rage. Realizing his terrible mistake, the king was horrified. He fell to his feet before intimidating sage and begged for forgiveness. To make up for ruining such a powerful ritual, Harishchandra made a solemn promise that would seal his fate. He told Vishwamitra he could have anything he wanted as penance. It was a blank check offered to one of the most powerful and unpredictable men in existence. And Vishwamitra, seeing this a chance, took the king at his word. The test had just begun. Vishwamitra looked down at the sorry king, and a truly epic demand formed his mind. He asked Harishchandra, what can he give? The king has made a valiant promise. He stood up, said, whatever the sage demanded. At this, the sage laughed and demanded his entire kingdom, his treasury, the army, the palaces, every single thing the king owned. Harishchandra had to give up everything that had made him a king. Only things the sage let him keep were his body, his wife Shaiva, and his son Rohitashva. For any other ruler, this would have been an insane, impossible request. It meant giving up a dynasty, falling from the height of power into absolute nothingness. But Harishchandra wasn't any other ruler. Without even hesitating, he agreed. He smiled, and with simple gesture, he handed over his entire kingdom to the sage. The sage, after gaining lordship of all possible tangible things that Harishchandra owned, demanded him along with his family to leave Ayodhya that very moment. He must give up his silken robes, his wife must give up her queen's royal attire, silken saris and golden ornaments, and wear simple clothes made from tree barks. Now, dressed in simple tree bark clothes, the king, queen, and the young prince prepared to walk away from the only life they had ever known. They were paupers, exiled in a land they once ruled. But just as they reached the border of the kingdom, Vishwamitra's voice stopped them. The sage wasn't done. He told Harishchandra that he was preparing for a grand ceremony, a Rajsuva Yagya, and he needed a donation or dakshina. Harishchandra was stunned. He had nothing to donate. He had just given away one of the richest kingdoms in the world. He didn't have any single penny to his name. He explained this to the sage. But Vishwamitra was merciless. He accused the king of trying to back out of his promise and cheating him. Trapped and desperate to fulfill his new demand, Harishchandra begged the sage for some time. He asked for 1 month to somehow earn the money. Vishwamitra agreed, but gave him a bone-chilling warning. If he didn't pay up in 1 month's time, he would face a terrible curse. The former king was now not just a pauper, but a debtor with an impossible clock ticking over his head. With no kingdom and no home, Harishchandra led his family to the one place on earth considered beyond reach of any single ruler, the holy city of Kashi, which we know today as Varanasi. It was a city dedicated to Lord Shiva, a sanctuary for holy men and poor. For Harishchandra, it was his last resort. The family wandered, suffering hardships they couldn't have imagined. The month Vishwamitra had given them was slipping away terrifyingly fast. In Kashi, Harishchandra desperately looked for work but found nothing. He was a king, trained in how to rule and how to fight, but he had no skills of a common labor. As the deadline got closer, hunger and despair began to eat away at them. The little boy Rohitashva cried for food. They couldn't give him. Finally, on the 30th day, he saw sage Vishwamitra in front of him. Harishchandra bowed down in humility, joining his hands in salutation. He spoke to the sage. O illustrious one, my life, my wife, and my son, out of these, please accept which is best arghya for you. Grant me permission to undertake whatever else I must do. Sage Vishwamitra reminded. O Harishchandra, as promised by you, 1 month has passed. You must give me my dakshina to perform Rajasuva Yajna. Harishchandra humbly said that 1 month would be completed today and requested the sage to wait for the remaining day. Sage Vishwamitra smiled cunningly and agreed, and left with the stern warning that if he was unable to fulfill his promise, he will surely face a terrible curse. As the sage left, Harishchandra started thinking from where he will get the wealth for sage's dakshina. Does he have any prosperous friend who can lend him some wealth? In which direction he will go? From where will he get that amount? If he fails to give what he promised to the sage, then he will be surely cursed, maybe become a worm, or worst among the worst. To honor his vow, he made up his mind on a devastating decision to sell himself into slavery. It was this moment of pure desperation that Shaiba, seeing her husband's pain, said, O Lord, give up these thoughts and protect the pledge you have yourself given. For men, it is said that there is no dharma superior to that of protecting a promise one has oneself made. If a person's words become futile, then his agnihotras, studies, donations, rites, and everything else will bear no fruit. Those with knowledge about text of dharma say that truth always leads to salvation, and untruth towards downfall of those who have not cleansed their Atman. You have performed 7 Ashwamedha Yajnas and a Rajasuva Yajna. If you do not fulfill a single pledge, you will be dislodged from those great deeds. Saying this, Shaiva started to weep profusely, pulling Rohitashva into her bosom. Then she made a suggestion that shattered of what was left of Harishchandra's heart. She told him to sell her as a slave to get the money to pay the sage. Hearing this, Harishchandra was horrified, utterly shocked. Thought of selling his beloved wife was an agony he could barely process. After a while, he composed himself and said, How can you speak like that? How can I be capable of following these words? Then, after a pause, he began cursing himself. Shame on me! Shame on me! He fell crying on the ground. Shaiba, seeing her husband broken and lying on the ground, said, O Lord, alas, the unthinkable has happened. One who deserved to lie down on a comfortable golden bed is now lying on the ground. One who has donated crores of cattle and wealth to Brahmins is now lying on the ground. Oh, what a misery! Oh God! The king who was equal to Indra is now reduced to this state. Saying this, she too fell beside her husband, sobbing and crying. Their son, sitting on the ground beside his parents, started to cry loudly. At that time, sage Vishwamitra arrived. The time has come for him to collect his wage for the Rajsuya Yajna. Seeing both Harishchandra and Shaiba lying on the ground, he commanded them to rise and give him his dakshina. He warned that misery increases day by day for one who bears a debt. The sage comforted Harishchandra by saying, If you look towards Dharma, give me my dakshina. It is through truth that the sun radiates heat. It is through truth that the earth exists. It is said that truth is supreme dharma. Heaven is established in truth. If truth and 1,000 horse sacrifices are held up on a weighing scale, truth is heavier than those 1,000 horse sacrifices. Listen to this virtuous word, O king. If you do not give me my dakshina today, before the sun sets, I'll certainly curse you. The sage departed after this harsh warning. Harishchandra, afflicted by fear, started thinking, what must he do to earn some wealth for sage's dakshina? Shaiba said to her husband to act according to her advice and put them into servitude. He saw no other way to keep his sacred promise. With a heart that felt like a stone, he agreed. He took his wife and son to the city marketplace. It was a scene of unbelievable sadness. Once a great king forced to auction off his own family. With a bleeding heart, Harishchandra declared, O citizens of Kashi, I am a cruel man. I am an extremely hard-hearted, wicked Rakshas who want to sell his beloved wife, but unable to give up his own life. I love her more than my own life. Does anyone have need for a servant maid? An aged wealthy Brahmin approached Harishchandra and told he needed a servant maid as his wife was unable to take care of household work. He agreed to pay him the desired wealth in lieu of Shaiba. Hearing the man's proposal, Harishchandra's heart shattered in pain. He stood speechless. The Brahmin handed the wealth to Harishchandra and seized Shaibas by her long hair and started to drag her away. Rohitashva saw that his mother was being dragged away in this ghastly fashion, started to cry loudly. He clung on to her sari and was not allowing her to be taken away by the man. Shaiba pleaded to the aged Brahmin to release her for a moment so that she can console her son. She with heavy heart said to her son, O prince, don't touch me, I am a servant maid now. Rohitashva saw his mother being manhandled violently. With tears flowing from his eyes, he rushed towards his mother and held her tightly. He said, Oh mother, my mother, don't go. Seeing this, the Brahmin pushed the child away. Shaiba pleaded to the aged man, Oh master, show some mercy. Please buy this child too, as without him I'll be of no use to you. Please show your kindness. I am like a cow with a calf. Do not separate me from him. The aged Brahmin quickly handed another pouch of wealth to Harishchandra and dragged Shaiba, carrying Rohitashva in her arms. Seeing his beloved wife and son being taken away so violently, Harishchandra lamented in great misery. Just like that, the family was torn apart. Harishchandra collected the money, his hands shaking and trembling, his soul broken. But the nightmare wasn't over. At that exact moment, Vishwamitra appeared out of thin air and took the money Harishchandra was holding. He looked into the pouches and friends, that was part 1 of the legend of Harishchandra. In the next part of the story, we will know if Harishchandra could pay off the amount he promised the sage for conducting a large scale Rajasuya Yajna after putting his beloved wife Shaiba and her only son Rohitashva into slavery. Were there more woes in store for him? Will there be any end to his misery? We would love to hear from you in the comments. Do you think one must keep their own promise? Until what level one must go to fulfill that in today's times? Please comment or write to me at arghyarthings@gmail.com. Stay tuned for the part 2 of the story, where you would get the answers to the all above enthralling questions. This podcast is available in audio format in all major podcast platforms and also available in video format on the YouTube, and my channel name is Stories from Upanishads and Puranas. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you like the content, as there are many more such alluring stories that have retold from our hidden treasures of Upanishads and Purans. Until then,
Shanti Shanti.